Hello and welcome to this podcast in which we will do a set review of the newest expansion, Magic Misadventures. And today I am joined with Arthur.
Hey guys.
Yeah. And everybody else is a little bit busy today, either like practicing for Hearthstone tournaments or having other stuff to do. But we've got the card ratings from both Myzrael and from Herko, and we will include them as well. I'm kind of already working on the expedition buckets, and I'm making a list over here with the different buckets and which cards are in them. We already saw Pantheon and like Kennen. Kennen also has a bucket together with Yasuo, it seems like. We saw some support cards for Rumble, and we haven't seen Chase yet. Chase was like released in the last expansion, and we haven't seen him since then. It got confirmed that it wasn't added, but we would like to have your help as well. If you see Chase now when playing expeditions, please contact us, tell us in which bucket he is in, and that would help us a lot. And I will include a link to this document in the description of this video, so if you want to take a look at the different buckets before they are officially added to the spreadsheet, you can go ahead. So let's jump over to the client. It has already released. I have already tested some of these cards, and we will just go by release order here and start with Grumbleslug. Arthur, do you still want to add something about the expansion that's coming out, or about Chase?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to be doing technically our first set review that impacts expeditions because the last time we did it for Jace, he didn't actually make it into expeditions, so this is technically our first real set review. So yeah, looking forward to seeing these cards in expeditions. Also, I'm a huge KDA and Ari fan, so great to see her finally making her debut here as well.
Okay, that's great. So let's start with the first card, Grumbleslug. Grumbleslug, just a 2-mana 2/3 with a tune, so basically a 1-mana 2/3 if you value the spell mana. And specialty is it's in Bandle City and build for. Maybe before we start, this will be an expedition set review, not a constructed set review, so we will mostly talk about expeditions. But my personal goal is also to clear up some misunderstandings, to show how these cards work. If you're just a new player or just want to figure out how these cards work, this will still be good, but we won't really talk about, oh, this card will be good in Battle Tree, this card will shake up the meta in Constructed. This is more expedition focused. Okay, Grumbleslug, again, 2-mana 2/3, and I would say this is just a decent card. So if we check Myzrael's rating, he agrees. M stands for Myzrael, and he gives it a 6 out of 10. Just an average filler card, I would say. This double region stuff doesn't really matter that much, except you're drafting Tristana, for example. It's just a good vanilla card in my opinion.
So Herko thinks it's a 6 or 7 out of 10. I'm a bit lower on it. I rated it a 4 out of 10. I agree that it is a vanilla card. A 2-mana 2/3 with a slight upside is vanilla, but I generally want to be doing better than average on my cards, so I normally want more out of it, so I wouldn't be too happy picking it. The kind of upside being a tune, I don't think is particularly strong. We've seen this effect on, for example, the 1-mana 2/1 with a tune, and we've also seen a 4-mana 4/3 with a tune, and both of those cards are fairly mediocre, so I don't think it having a tune is a particularly good upside, even on a vanilla card.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot. I will give it a 5 out of 10 here. This is just how I rate vanilla cards, and don't think you will be super pleased to play this, but it wasn't like, it's just like a vanilla card most of the time, so you don't have such a big downside either. By the way, over here, if you look at these ratings, we have like M for Myzrael, H for Herko. Herko is like the one doing all of these articles. He joined us in the beginning of these podcasts, and is like also active on Mastering of Runeterra. Should definitely have heard of him. And then Arthur and me, Conan's son.
Something I do want to discuss, just I know we're getting stuck on the first one already, is um I also think there is a difference between a 2 mana 2/3 and a 2 mana 3/2 in expeditions. In terms of the stats wise, in terms of win rate, I always see 2 mana 3/2s doing better than 2 mana 2/3s in general. Um, so I normally would want my 2 mana plays to be 3/2s rather than 2/3s. Do you agree with that?
I would say the main reason why the 3-2s are performing better is because the 3-2s are all Noxus and Demacia, mostly, and those are just like higher performing regions. And I generally find like the 2-3-3s are a little bit stronger, can like block more, and I'm more of a defensive player anyways, so I I prefer the 2-3s, especially the one with Predict. Like I really like this card, the Predict one. No,
I was
this,
thinking even within a region, there are Demacia 3/2s and Demacia 2/3s, and Noxus 3/2s and Noxus 2/3s. I have found that the 3/2 seems to have higher win rate. Now, it might be because of the upside, but on average, it seemed like the 3/2s were stronger. My theory was behind that maybe 3/2s can trade up a bit better in terms of into 3 drops, maybe, whereas 2/3s they're better against, say, 2/1s. But the fact is, there isn't that many 1 mana 2/1s in expeditions too much, or they're not very popular. So I generally would prefer a 3/2 over a 2/3. It may be down to a personal preference in that I generally prefer playing aggro and you prefer playing control, I think so.
yeah, that's probably what it comes down to here. Okay, let's move on to the next card. This one is a little bit more interesting. And it's the Yordle Captain. This one was like frowned upon by many players seeing it, being like, oh my god, this will make Poppy and Bandle even stronger. But I'm actually not too high on it. Let's first start with the other people's ratings. So Myzrael gave it a 9 out of 10, so thinks it's like a really good card.
Herko gave it 5 to 6 out of 10. Personally, I think it's 8 out of 10. I think it's very strong. I think even if you get one more pump out of it, I think it's pretty decent. And although it doesn't kind of allow you to curve into it in terms of how Battlesmith would normally work, and Battlesmith is very strong in expeditions, the fact that you can essentially double spell after this and get 1 or 2 pumps out of it makes me think it's very strong and something that ideally you'd want to remove against it.
Yeah, I think it's less like a Poppy and more like a Bandle, like a Greenglade Elder, and that it buffs your cards in your hand and it comes down later or one turn later. So it is just generally a little bit weaker, I would say. And I don't really think like a 4 mana 4/4 obviously is good, and it has like a decent enough upside with granting your other units more stats. But by turn 4, you will oftentimes not have that many 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops in your hand. Of course, you are playing Battle City, so you can just generate more stuff. But just like from playing Greenglade Elder, I don't think it's that strong of a card. It's of course good, but I would give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
And just to quickly showcase the other card, it's the Elder. This one buffs all the cards in hands, so all allies in hands get +1/+1. And this is kind of what your Captain does as well, that it doesn't really buff your board anymore. If you've already swarmed out, it does nothing. It only rewards you for swarming out afterwards, which is a little bit slow in my opinion, but it will probably be a good card and make Bandle even better in expeditions. I haven't actually seen this card, by the way. I'm not sure in which card pool it will live. Maybe it's just not an expeditions card at all.
I would expect it him Poppy's one, right? Mentors.
Yes,
Zero?
I've seen like
Makes sense.
10 Mentors buckets so far, and I didn't see the Captain yet, despite being a common.
Okay.
So let's see.
Maybe they thought it would be too strong. Who knows? What was interesting when this came out, and it was only the second card that came out, was that how many other cards we tried to compare it to We compared it to Poppy, we compared it to Bannerman, we compared it to Battlesmith, we compared it to Greenglade Elder, we compared it to Aberrose and Hearthguard. The reason why I have, and it isn't quite exactly like any of those, right? In that it needs to stick around, unlike Hearthguard and Greenglade Elder. It only works for equal or less, unlike Battlesmith. So the effect is actually fairly unique, even though it reminds us of those other effects. But all of those cards that I listed, I think are actually fairly strong in expeditions. So this is why I think it is in fairly good stead in terms of its rating.
Okay. Let's do a... Okay, sorry for hearing those Discord sounds in the background. I have now muted those. Of course, there's a lot of stuff going on in our Discords right now because everybody's excited about expeditions, and I'm sorry that it's like had it appeared in the video. It should have stopped by now. Let's resume our review with the next card. I have to quickly look which one it is. And it's Minion, one of my favorite ones. Minion. Very cool design. Hello. Oh. If you search for Minion, it just shows you like almost everything. Well, maybe not. Okay, Minion is a 2-mana 2/1 with Last Breath. It creates a copy of me in hand at round end, so you just get more minions when your first one dies. Basically an Undying that can block, but you have to replay it over and over again, which is pretty cool. So, Myzrael gives Minion a 7 out of 10, so small upside over vanilla.
Herko gives it 7 to 8 out of 10. Personally, I gave it an 8 out of 10 as well. I think it's a very strong effect, and it could be very annoying in the sense that certainly this is an effect that you really want in the late game. Any mana that you have, you can sink into this, and it will just give you an infinite blocker. And an Undying that can block is something else entirely from the Undying. That's the reason why they gave it unable to block. So yeah, I think it's a very strong card, but it is more for the late game because at any time where mana is a constraint, and you're not worried so much about card advantage, you're more worried about the tempo on the board. A 2-mana 2/1 is not very good value. So anytime when you could be playing other cards, you probably want to be doing those unless you are ahead enough that you don't mind losing a bit on the board.
Yeah, I really like this card as well. I'm always a big value player, and having this infinite jump blocker that just comes back and you can sacrifice it over and over. It's just so good, and mana stops being like very important in the late game. You just are able to spend all of your 10 mana each turn. So this throwing these 2 mana in for an infinite jump blocker is so cool. And if you like play a 5/2 for 2 mana, you will be just so sad if your opponent throws down a minion and blocks you with it. So that would be a terrible feeling. Yeah, I gave it an 8 out of 10 as well, so we can all agree this is probably a good card in Expeditions.
Have you seen it yet in Expeditions?
No, not yet. But I didn't draft any Darkness Rising buckets yet. I would expect it to be.
Okay.
But yeah, obviously you have to wait 20 minutes before resetting each draft. So I only made like 4 or 5 drafts so far. At the time of the recording, the expansion has been out for like 2 hours, I think. So obviously don't have like all of the buckets yet, but it will be kept updated. So for the next one, actually we have the Gust Monk and the Cloud Stance. I would start with the Cloud Stance since it's actually a physical card, and Gust Monk is then the unit that generates this Cloud Stance. So what does Cloud Stance do?
So Cloud Stance is a 1-mana burst spell, and it gives an ally +2/+0, and round end recall me this round.
Okay, that's very interesting of an effect. And yeah, burst speed combat tricks are always nice, I would say. And especially Myzrael is very high on it. He's like an 8 out of 10. It's a little bit. It's not surprising for Myzrael because Myzrael really likes 1-mana combat tricks. What does Herko think about it?
So Herko didn't rate Cloud Stance specifically. Maybe he missed out on the fact that it's actually a collectible card with a common gem underneath it.
Okay.
Personally, I'm the exact opposite in that I rated it a 2 out of 10. It is not a card that I would want in my deck at all, pretty much. Not as a card on its own. I'm higher on Gust Monk. We'll talk about that later. But if I compare this Cloud Stance to, for example, Elixir of Wrath, the 1 mana plus 3/0 in Noxus, this is one less, which matters somewhat. And then the effect Round End Recall Me. I would normally expect this to be a drawback. But obviously, the idea that it's supposed to go with Ari and Kennen and be used as a upside, in a way that what is that Vladimir spell? The 2 mana
Transfusion.
Yeah, where in that archetype, maybe doing 1 damage to one of your allies can be seen as an upside. The idea here is that the Round End Recall Me this round is actually an upside. If you can get those kind of synergies together, then I guess this could be an upside, but otherwise I see it as a worse Elixir of Wrath, and I already don't think that card is particularly strong. And also, I personally think, having seen all of the cards now, for this archetype, Kennen and Ari, I don't think it's a particularly good archetype either, because in Expeditions, it's a lot about tempo, and recalling your own units is very anti-tempo, and I feel like you're just losing on board with this kind of archetype. So, and the payoff just isn't good enough to be worthwhile.
Okay, very interesting, very opposite decisions. I'm a little bit in the middle of it, just because Panel City doesn't really have that big of units. Like, obviously, everybody makes the joke that Panel City units are overstated, but they're not like 5/2s or 7/3s like Noxus units. And if you have like a 5/2, making it into an 8/2 doesn't really matter that much. But if you make your 2/2 into a 4/2, that can allow you to trade up decently. And I would say the Round End Recall Me can be decent sometimes, especially if you push in damage, if you have some elusive units that you want to replay. So I would give it a 4 out of 10. I still don't think it's a good card, but I would say you more often than not are okay with playing it, especially since Bandle City doesn't have any other combat tricks, because in like Noxus you would have like the +3/+2, then you have Weapon Hilt, Brother Spawned, etc., and then you just end up with too many of the same effects. This effect with the buffing the attack is like only 2 cards in Battle City do that, the other one being the Flame Spitter, also released in this set. So because it's a more unique effect, I think this card will see some play and will be surprising as well, just because of how different Battle City is from Noxus. It's probably still not a card you want 10 of in your deck, for example, but a 1-off I think is fine. Okay, then let's move on to the card that generates this one, the Gust Monk. Basically a 2-mana 2/2 that, when summoned, creates this Cloud Stance in hand. What's funny for me is that it just like can go infinite on its own. Like, you can just play this, recall it again, play this again, recall it again. I don't know what the purpose of this would be, but it's pretty funny for me.
I didn't realize that. There isn't much of an engine there unless you're trying to block infinite 1/1s, I guess. But that doesn't come up very often in Expeditions, so it doesn't even block against minions. So yeah, that's funny.
I don't know if you have like any summon triggers or something. I don't know, whenever, like in Path of Champions, whenever you summon a unit, deal 1 damage to your opponent's Nexus or something, if there's ever a card like that.
Yeah, I can't remember of very many. It's not an on-death trigger either, so you can't do any tricks with that in terms of Neverglade Collector or something. But
yeah, you have to definitely brainstorm about that, but it's just a fun interaction I wanted to point out. And that's probably why it isn't like Recall Me now, but Round End Recall Me, because otherwise it would just be like little infinite. But yeah.
Well, if it said Recall Me now, then it just, the +2/+0 wouldn't mean anything.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that makes sense.
+2/+0 and then doesn't do combat, so.
Okay, so Myzrael, funnily enough, thinks of this card like lower than the actual Cloud Stance and gives it a 6 out of 10. which I find very surprising. What's Herko's opinion?
Herko's opinion is 5-ish, he thinks. And he notes that Cloud Stance is not fleeting, which is true. My own personal opinion is I think it's 4 out of 10, which is more than what I gave Cloud Stance. And in general, that is the case for cards that creatures that generates other spells. So for Demacia is not very good, but Vanguard Sergeant is fantastic. Guile is not very good, but Thorn of the Rose is decent. And so even though I don't think Cloud Stance is a particularly good card, I think Gust Monk is actually fine. I don't think it's great because a 2-mana 2/2 stat line is not great, especially if I don't like 2-mana 2/3s. But this upside, as Herko said, it not being fleeting means that it has that throw of activation in terms of it can effectively be a 3-mana 4/2 if you need it to be in the combat, or only once, I guess, to trade up. Or in the future, anytime you have 1-mana spell mana floating, it can give a +3/+0. In that sense, it kind of reminds me of, say, Draven's Blades, at least, in the sense that they know you have it, they know that you have it, and every point of combat will now need to consider what happens if they have an extra point or two here or there. And that does make combat a bit more tricky, and they'll have to end up making trades that maybe they don't want. So in that sense, I think Gust Monk is fine. But yeah, even though Cloud Stance isn't fantastic.
So because of this, what you just described, this threat of activation, I actually think this Gust Monk will be good, like not super strong, but I'm also with Myzrael on the 6 out of 10, because I would think similar to Draven, where like Felicity is like a swarm archetype, and it's just so hard to make good blocks if you have here this constant +2/+0 luring in your opponent's hand. So that's why I would say this card will be decent. If you think about Contrologist, 2/2 for 2 that generates another card. Of course, Contrologist is very flexible. This one always generates the same one, but I think it can actually be an upside that it generates a face-up card, because your opponent will be like, oh no, if I block with this, they will play their card and then it dies, and they will not block and you will get free damage in. So I think this being like face-up and not fleeting is a big like source of misplays from your opponent, because they're like, oh my god, I will lose my stuff if I block. And like just the threat of playing this card out will often be enough to make them not block, to make them do weird attacks. And I think that's worth something on its own.
So interesting note with Contrologist, in that Contrologist will also be able to generate Cloud Stance, right?
Mm-hmm. I think I would decently oftentimes pick Cloud Stance. Like if you look at the bundle spells, it's like all small stuff like that deals damage, for example. And if I have like the choice between a poison arrow, or how it's called, the 1-mana poison card, and this, I would oftentimes, I think, pick the Cloud Stance.
Okay. I agree that by having it face up, they would be more likely. They have the possibility of making misplays, but I still think that having a face down Cloud Stance versus a face up Cloud Stance, I would prefer having the face down Cloud Stance so that they can't see it, so they would actually run into it, rather than have it being face up in my hand so that they'll have to play around it.
No, I think it's like for me it's different. I think I like the face up more, because it's like always pushes my opponent be like, oh, if I block this now, it's so bad, and I don't have to use it. But it's interesting how we like disagree on that.
I think that's particularly fascinating, because I'm assuming my opponents are fairly decent and will play around it effectively, and won't play too much around it, whereas you think you'll actually be able to punish them for playing around it too much.
Yeah, but just think about it, if you have like this Gust Monk on the board and they play, a 6 next turn or a Riven next turn, then you attack into it. And beforehand, they would just be like, okay, I block it, 3-drop for 3-drop, that's not bad, even a 6, just a Loyal Battle Bear, for example. 3 mana for 3 mana, that's not bad. But now, if you have this sitting around and they see this card in their hand, they'd be like, is it really worth it to attack? Isn't it better to like hold my combat trick up next turn? Or should I block this one? And it just makes it so awkward if they know about it. Not even if they're like decent or not, it just like influences their mind more.
It influences their mind, but I don't think I value that as much. I would rather have them block and then we'll be able to kill the Riven than have them not block and then we won't be able to kill the Riven and then they'll generate more blades out of it, etc.
Yeah, Blades is probably a bad example, more like a loyal Badger Bear. That would be more of the average one. Of course, a 2-mana 2-drop shouldn't be able to deal with a good champion, but that would be overpowered. But okay, we are talking a lot about these first cards. Let's move on to Tornado Warrior. Let's see here. Tornado Warrior. Oh, I really like this one. I find this one very cool. So, when it's summoned, it grants +1/+0 and a random keyword, and it keeps those stat buffs and keywords when recalled. So I think the second part of this effect doesn't really matter at all. Like, you shouldn't really build a deck around recalling this multiple times and stacking keywords on it. But just being a 2-mana 3/2 with a random keyword is oftentimes quite good. I would say like half of the keywords make this pretty decent, and the other half is like a random upside if it gets like Overwhelm, for example, or Impact. It doesn't matter that much, but if you get an Elusive, for example, Quick Attack, that's pretty hard to deal with, and I would say like half of the times it's a very good card. Like, good card.
Yep. So it seems like Herko's thinks depending on bucket composition anywhere from 1 to 10, so maybe 5 or 6 on average. Personally, I also think it's a pretty good card. I gave it 6 out of 10. Because at minimum it is a 2-mana 3/2 with a random keyword. Unfortunately, we don't get to see what that keyword is before it's summoned, so we can't plan around it in that sense. But a couple weeks ago when we rated some of the cards that don't exist in Expeditions, we talked about Patch Porobot, which is a fun card. And I think this could be fun as well. So not thinking about the second line about the recall, a 2-mana 3/2 with a keyword already is pretty good. Pretty decent. Probably, yeah, above average, as I said. And then the fact that he gets to keep the buffs and recall is a slight upside, but I can't imagine myself using that side too much. It will be more hoping for a 2-mana 3/2 quick attack or lifesteal or something like that.
I think this line will come up sometimes randomly if you play like a homecoming on it to remove a threat. If you have like Ari on the board and want to flip your Ari, like there are some opportunities where you can randomly trigger this one if you have like mana laying around. But yeah, I would give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's like pretty strong, similar to Myzrael. Where if you like, it's obviously luck based, but even if you fail, you still get a 3/2 out of it, which you said yourself is like stronger than a 2/3, oftentimes. And if you really roll like Elusive, for example, or some of these good keywords, then you're really doing it, and it's big upside for basically no downside. We can agree it's always a decent card. I find it very interesting, like that we mostly agree so far, except for this Cloud Stand where we were like totally far apart. But yeah, it's pretty similar so far.
I will add that despite me being quite down on the recall archetype in Expeditions, I do think it's probably hard to determine as of yet, because we've not really ever had an archetype like this in Expeditions yet. So maybe there is some premium here that I'm not accounting for, that historically the recall cards have not been great, but maybe added together it can be more than some of its parts.
We had a bucket before that was called Total Recall. It was a Timo Karma bucket and was total trash.
Okay, maybe that's why I didn't have a draft it, because it's so bad. So
yeah, it was like recall your puff caps and then you can your puff cap generators, and then you can play Karma and double your puff cap generators puff caps. And we were just like, no, I'm just drafting an elusive deck. And
So does that archetype still exist then? Because
yes,
I don't think we retire any archetypes. So okay, sure.
it got updated even. It got like this woodland guy we saw later. Like a lot of different random buckets got updated already. That's pretty nice.
Oh, good, yeah.
Okay. But let's move on to the next one. What does Quicken do?
So Quicken is a 2-mana Bandle City spell. It is a fast spell, and it recalls a unit with 3 or less power.
Yes.
And it's a common.
What do you think about it?
So I think it's an interesting card in that it can be used on your opponent's creatures and it can be used on your own creatures. So it's half like Will of Ionia and half like Culling Strike, but really like neither of those cards. So Herko gave it 7 to 8 out of 10, and I gave it 3 out of 10. I don't think it's a particularly good card because I think either half of the card, in terms of recalling their unit for 3 or less power, that is a pure tempo play and you're down on card advantage in that sense. And then the other half being bouncing your own card in a way that Recall does, the 1-mana fast spell from Ionia. And that can recall anything. It can't recall only your units with 3 or less power. So I feel like overall, despite it being flexible, I don't really want either half those cards. So I don't think it's a particularly strong card.
Very interesting. So I've got the chance to play with it a little bit already because I played like a Kennen run in Path of Champions and it felt really strong. Like you don't just like get mana neutrality ever. You can really bounce some insane stuff with it because a lot of cards in lore only have like 3 or less power. I bounced a Skarmoth Runner with it, just the 6 mana 3/8. Bounced the Battering Ram with it, and it's just like you can bounce Poppy with it, and of course you can also recall your own unit. And I tend to actually like recall in my decks. I don't really like it in Ionia because it's like super tempo focused. Usually you have to be very aggressive as Ionia, but as Bandle City where you have all of these random value units that you might want to play again, I actually really like this flexibility. So I'm also on the like 7 out of 10 train here. But I find it quite interesting that you see it differently than the other people do.
Yeah, I just think either half of this card is unimpressive. So
I think it makes a big difference that it's like Bandle City and not Ionia for me. If it was Ionia, I would be like, Ionia has 10,000 of these effects, but Bandle City is like one of the few cheap interaction spells they have, except for like 1 damage pings. So this can be a big tempo swing in my opinion. Anything you want to add? Can interrupted you?
No, not particularly.
Okay, so then let's move on. Let's see how this card actually turns out, if it's good or if it doesn't good. And the next one is Thunder Fist. Thunder Fist being a 3-mana 2/3 with impact. I mean, it's summoned. If you summon another Thunder Fist this game, you transform it into Marza Crashing Thunder, which turns then into a 5/4. So this one
5/4 with impact.
With impact as well, yes, obviously. With this one, Myzrael gave it an surprising 8 out of 10. So he thinks it's a really strong card. And Herko?
So Herko gave it 5 to 10. 5 to 10, so average 7 or 8 as well, I guess. I guess I'm the pessimist on this podcast in that I gave it a 3 out of 10. I don't think it's a particularly strong card. I think 3-mana 2/3 impact, I guess, is not too different from a 2-mana 2/3 impact that we have in Stone Stackers nowadays. But 1 mana really does make a difference, and it's actually pretty below par in terms of the value. What is interesting is that this is obviously meant as a recall synergy in that you can recall it and then play it again, and it turns into a 3-mana 5/4 impact. But as I understand it, if you just play 2 Thunderfist, the second one will become a Massa, right?
Yes, the first one doesn't transform. So you just played a 3-mana 3/2 already. And
So you can either play the second one, or you can try and recall one and play it again. Um, Recalling this to play it again seems like a lot of tricks to try and play a 3 mana 5/4 impact, which, on the stats of it is a pretty great value. But if you're having to do recall tricks with it, I don't think it's fantastic. And if you are playing them side by side, in terms of first you play the Thunderfist, second you play Master, then you end up paying about 6 mana for 7/7 impact, which double impact, which I guess is still pretty good. But overall, I don't think this is a card that I really want in my deck too much.
I actually have to agree with you. I gave it a 4 out of 10. I think this card is quite bad as well. And this is also in the Kennen deck, so I played with it already. And just playing a 3 mana 2/3 with no upside does feel so bad. If you can incidentally flip it, then it's sure it turns into a 5/4. If you can draft 5 of those, then it's also a 5/4 at some point. But the later the game goes, the lower this impact of a random 5/4 unit is. Just look at Yetis, for example. We have these fairly red Yetis that are generated on top of the deck. They just are one mana 5/5s, and they rarely see play and don't they're decent, but not mind-blowingly good. And I find that this would be the same. Of course, it's still a playable unit, 3 mana 2/3. There's worse things you can do, but I'm also not high on it. And I'm really surprised that Myzrael gave it a 8 out of 10 here.
Yeah, the earlier the game is, the more the value matters in terms of power and tough attack. I don't know what they call it. Power and toughness relative to cost. I've played too many card games to know what attack and defense and power and health and whatever. Whereas, yeah, exactly as you said, later as it goes on, those stats don't matter as much, because that's when mana isn't as much of a throttle, it isn't the constraint. In which case, the efficiency value doesn't matter as much. So
yeah, that's absolutely true. So let's see how it turns out. But I have a guess that it's not going to be that strong. Okay, next card will be the Kennen. Kennen is a fun one.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, I was waiting for that.
Yeah. And it is a bit of a mouthful. Okay, so
I can read it as well if you don't want.
Is a 1 mana Bandle City and Ionian champ. It's a Yordle. It's a 1 mana 2/1 with quick attack. And when he's summoned, create a Mark of the Storm in hand. So I'll jump to Mark of the Storm maybe. So Mark of the Storm is a 0 mana fleeting and fast spell. It grants an enemy Mark of the Storm. If they already have it, remove the mark to stun and deal 2 to them instead. So the idea is that with 1 Mark of the Storm, it does nothing, but the second Mark of the Storm, it stuns and deals 2 to them. Kennen will level up when you've summoned the same ally 5+ times this game, so effectively 5 times this game. This can be... I assume this doesn't track specific cards. It means that if you play 5 cards with the same name, it will level up, right?
Exactly, that's how it works.
So you can do this either by playing 5 of the same cards, which in Expeditions is doable, because obviously we don't have a 3-card limit in Expeditions. Or ideally how it's meant to work is that you're supposed to recall cards and play them again. And the fact that this can be happening inside the deck means Kennen doesn't need to be on board to see this from flipping. He can do this inside a deck and level up. So if you manage to get Kennen to flip, it turns into a 1 mana 3/2 quick attack. And then when I'm summoned, blocked, or when he attacks, create a Mark of the Storm in hand. And Mark of the Storm is exactly what I said it was. So I don't see a rating from Herko here exactly.
I didn't see either. So
yeah, my personal rating on it is a 4 out of 10. I'm pretty low on Kennen. I think, and that 4 out of 10 is mostly on the basis that he's a 1 mana 2/1 quick attack, which is pretty good. But very quickly gets outscaled later on. Effectively, before he levels up, how I read it is that when he levels, when he gets played, he generates a Mark of the Storm, which is ephemeral. So if you play him on turn 1, which is when the 1 mana 2/1 quick attack is the most effective, he gets to Mark of the Storm their 1-drop, or if they don't have a 1-drop, it's fleeting, so it disappears. If you get to play it later, then you get to mark one of their higher drops, but then a 1 mana 2/1 isn't quick attack isn't very effective. And then there is no way of generating more Mark of the Storm until he levels up or you recall him, which is not very strong. The idea, obviously, and you see in the trailer as well, is that after he levels up, he gets to make Mark of the Storm when he attacks or blocks or summons, and then he can kind of make 2 in a row, which is the only time when it starts becoming effective. But just having 1 Mark of the Storm is very ineffective. So he really needs those recall synergies to get rolling. And I think trying to put so much on such a small champion and then also getting a fairly weak effect, even if you get to Mark of the Storm and stun and deal 2 to them, is not very strong. And I think it will be quite hard to level up. So overall, I don't think it's a very strong champion.
Yeah, I have to be on the same side as you here. And like I said, I played a Kennen run already in Path of Champions, and it felt so terribly hard to level him up, even in a deck that's built around leveling him up. Because like I was sitting there with these Thunder Fists and was recalling my Thunder Fists, and I played like 4 or 5 copies of the Thunder Fist. Of course, you could recall Kennen, it would be like cheaper. But I already played like 3 Thunder Fists at that point, and I was like, might as well complete this one. And I almost had like this encounter deck out before I like finished playing all of these same allies, and it felt super tempo inefficient to just recall and replay all again. Funnily enough, it might actually be, like you said, easier to level him up in Expedition, since you can just play 10 copies of the same card. And then if you flip him, the effect really doesn't feel that strong, I would say. Just this random mark is like good, he's basically then unblockable, but I had the same feeling playing him as I had with playing Fizz. If you play Fizz, you get a 1 mana 2/1 out of it, and sure, it has then random upsides and stuff, but they will just not block it, they will take a little bit of damage and move on with the game. And Kennen even feels like weaker because he doesn't even have elusive, he just has quick attack, so if they play a 2/3 for example, then it's very hard to get more damage in. And again, the flip, sure, you can kill the unit, or you can stun the unit at least that blocks Kennen, but if you just let Kennen through, you just get 1 Mark of the Storm. And yeah, I don't really have a feeling that this champion will be that strong. Of course, it's still a 1 mana 2/1, but it's a champion slot that you have to give up for this 1 mana 2/1 with quick attack. So I think I'm for the first time going to be lower than everybody else and be like a 3 out of 10. So I really don't, like, it really felt not fun to play him. And even the upside, the flip, when you work so hard for it, like in Hearthstone you would get like all of your units turning into 5/5s. In Legends of Runeterra you get to stun a unit each turn. It just doesn't feel as rewarding. Okay, so first champion done. Then we have the Kennen flip card. This is Lightning, or the Kennen champion spell, Lightning Rush. This is obviously also a real card. And this one actually felt quite nice, I would say. So it's a 3 mana fast spell that you have to recall an ally to deal 2 to anything. Note that this is a 2, so if they kill your ally in response to you recalling it, then the 2 damage doesn't go off. And you obviously have to recall an ally, you can just like choose not to. That's not how the card works. And Myzrael gave it a 7 out of 10. What does Herko think about the card?
So Herko missed out on this as well, it looks like.
Okay, too bad. How do you like the card?
So I don't think I am very high on this. I gave it 4 out of 10. I think if So I think Homecoming was better than I expected it to be,
Hmm.
in the sense that I thought it would be a offensive Will of the Ionia that would require you to bounce one of your units. How it actually played out was it was a defensive Will of Ionia, which also let you bounce one of their their cards, which was fine. So in that sense, I think Lightning Rush could be okay in the sense that when they try and kill your ally, you can recall it to deal 2 damage to anything. So in that sense, you're almost getting kind of a Will of Ionia plus a Mystic Shot. Um, Sorry, a recall plus a Mystic Shot. And I guess that would be 1 + 2 = 3, I guess. Um, so Homecoming is what, 4 cost, and Will
Yes.
of Ionia is now 4, and Recall is 1. So yeah, so I guess that's a bit higher up on that. I don't think you really want to be doing this offensively too much, in the sense of you're recalling one of your allies that you don't really want to recall in order to do to Mystic Shot something, because that's a very expensive Mystic Shot. Recalling an ally plus 1 more mana, that tempo loss is just too much. But you want to use it defensively, in that you want to protect one of your creatures, and then Mystic Shot something. But overall, I think still it's nothing special. So yeah, I think it's 4 out of 10.
I actually gave it a 6 out of 10 because I think both sides, both the offensive side and the defensive side, will feel better to play. Because oftentimes with Homecoming, I have the feeling, yes, I have to really get rid of this unit, I have to recall this unit right now, but I don't want to recall one of my own units. Or I want to save my own unit, but at the same time, I spend 4 mana and then give them, I don't know, their Contrologist, for example, back, or their value creature back. And this just feels way more flexible. It's first of all 1 mana cheaper, and you will always want to deal 2 damage. This is also deals damage to the Nexus, by the way. So if you really don't want to, or it can be used as a finisher, if you really don't want to hit any of the opponent's units for whatever reason, if they don't have any units, then you can still use this to recall your unit, deal 2 damage to them, and save it. And even if you just ping a random unit down, this will be much better. For example, if they play a single combat, for example, a concerted strike, you can recall your unit and shoot something, and it's a Mystic Shot if you really need it. So if you have to Mystic Shot something, if they hook your, I don't know, a big unit with a 5/2 Screeching Dragon, then you can still use it as a Mystic Shot. It feels way better than as if you would recall this damaged Mystic Dragon, this damaged Screeching Dragon back to the hand. So I think both sides will feel better to play than Homecoming, and that will turn out actually as quite of a nice card. Again, it's in Banner City, so Banner City is more like value cards you want to recall anyways, so I gave it a 6 out of 10 for that reason. And of course, Cannon Flip, it's also decent to have like recall your own cannon and get it back into your hand. It's way better than, for example, Shadow Shift. Good, then we have Ember Monk. Ember Monk, a card I have argued a lot on the like constructed subreddit, because people were like, oh my god, this card is so insane, it's like a super broken card. And I was like, no. And actually, Myzrael says it's a 9 out of 10, if I see correctly. Yes. And a 9 out of 10 for me would be, for example, Bandle Commando, which is a card that just wins you the game on its own, Screeching Dragon. And Myzrael thinks Ember Monk is on the same level as Screeching Dragon. What do you think about this, and what does Herko say?
So Herko gave this 5 out of 10. I gave this 3 out of 10. The reason for that is because I think a 4 mana 3/3 quick attack, when it's played on curve, is not very impressive. Plenty of things will be able to block into it effectively, and it doesn't attack into it. In which case, it's going to need time to ramp up. When it does, obviously it can be decent, in the sense that when it grows into the next time you attack, hopefully maybe it will be a 5/3 quick attack, and then it's a bit stronger. Maybe they'll be forced to have to chump it or something like that. But in the end, it still doesn't block very well, and overall, yeah, I think it just takes quite a long time. It wants to come down in the mid game, and then it scales well into the late game. But in the mid game, you also, if you don't want to get behind on board, you also need to play something that can actually defend as well. And if this is not able to do that, then they might be able to overpower you on the crackback.
Yeah. One card I would compare this to is actually Xerath, because Xerath is also a 4-mana 3/3 that kind of like a good effect if it sticks around. But how often is your Xerath really sticking around? Most of the time it just gets like, I don't know, Aftershocked, for example, or the Screeching Dragon hooks it, and a 4-mana 3/3 baseline is just not that strong in my opinion. So I'm also pretty low in Ember Monk. I gave it a 4 out of 10. I think it's still a playable unit, but it's definitely not something you want multiple copies in your deck, and it's just very slow card, and you need to like really put in the work, and then they play a removal spell on it, and then you feel bad that you put in all the work. And I think this will rarely ever take over games. So I think we two are like the pessimistic ones. Myzrael was like, oh my god, this is so much power creep. Every card is like a 8 out of 10. Okay, next one, very excited for this one, is Rissu, the Silent Storm. It's a 5-mana 1/1, and when summoned, summons a Storm Cloud, which is a 7/3 with impact. Of course, the mana cost doesn't matter. Basically a 1/1 and a 7/3. And I will just do this one first, because Myzrael said it's a 7 out of 10. And I think this is a really, really terrible card, and you never want it in your deck. I actually gave it a 2 out of 10, because it's just such a terrible distribution. You never want the 1/1, and you never really want a 7/3 in the late game, unless you have a specific combo with it, unless you can recall it for basically free. It will just, the 7/3 will just run into a random 3/2, or into 2 2/1s even, and just die, and the 1/1 will never do anything. So I think this is really, really a bait card, and really don't like it. What are your opinions, Herkos?
So Herko gave it 3 to 4 out of 10. I surprisingly am higher on this. I think it's 6 out of 10.
Okay.
And I agree that the 1/1 is pretty much inconsequential. It's a jump. And the 7/3 with impact is not very good on the attack, because it essentially trades into the equivalent of 2 drops, really, 3 2s. However, just the sheer amount of stats it has, 8 4 plus impact, is something to contend with. And the idea is, if you don't attack with it, you can leave it behind to block, and it will trade with pretty much anything. Like, sure, you might be able to not be able to attack into their small creatures, but they won't be able to attack you with their big creatures either. And if there is any scenario where up to turn 5, you've been trading small creature for small creature, small creature for small creature, and they don't have any small creatures, and they're still curving out into the later creatures, then the Storm Cloud certainly will trade with their 5 drops, 6 drops, maybe even the 7 drops. And then you'll be able to get some value in that sense. That's not accounting for the recall synergies, which I put pretty low premium on. So I think is actually decent. As I said, 6 out of 10, just slightly above average. I don't think it's amazing or anything, but yeah, I think even though it doesn't attack incredibly well, a 7/3 on the defense is fine. So
Yeah, I don't really like playing these units on the defense. Like, for example, Werfel Rider has the same stat line, a 5-mana 7/3, and it's just never been a good card. And I still think Battle City wants to be a little bit more aggressive, that doesn't want to really have this gigantic chant blocker, or a gigantic blocker basically only valid on the defense. And my like horror scenario is they play a Fleet Feather Tracker turn 1, and then they just go for the Young Witch turn 2, and then you sit there with your 7/3, and they just would kill it with your 1-drop and the 2-drop. And like, of course, it doesn't happen that often in Expeditions, because it's a good 2-card combo, but something similar might happen where you just have like 3 damage lying around randomly. For example, a Darkness deck, if you play against Darkness, they stack the Darkness once, and then they kill it for 3 mana. And I think this is such a big downside. But if you learned anything, it's very hard to judge like these cards in advance because we oftentimes like have pretty disagreeing ratings. I find it very, very interesting. Okay, next one is Saga Seeker. Oh, this one is insane. Like I have to warn you. Like I've played with this one against the AI, and it's insane. Myzrael gave it an 8 out of 10. And I would actually, like, in my opinion, this is the same power level as, I don't know, it's still a build around card, you have to get a deck for it. But in a deck that is built around it, if you have like can trigger it multiple turns in a row. Because basically how it works is it's a 1/2 and it is faded. And each round, the first time an allied card targets me, it grants +1/+1. So you can only do this once each round. You can of course do it in your opponent's round. But it isn't like you can play 5 spells on it and get +5/+5. You can only trigger it once a round. But still, I played this like against only the AI so far. I played it on turn 1, and by turn 5 it was like an A10-10 already, because you just like randomly buff it with Zenith Blades, then you play some gems on it, and maybe buff it some other way, and it just grows so fast. I didn't believe it before, but actually like in a build around deck I would give it the same grade as Myzrael, basically a, I don't know, 8 to 8.5 out of 10. If you build around it, of course if you don't have any cards to target it, it's garbage. But in Targon, even if you just have like gems, for example, just a bunch of mountain goats, gift givers, which actually live in this card pool, gift giver in particular, then you just have free value and free stats basically. So I think it's going to be pretty good on average.
Interesting. Herko gave it 4 to 6 out of 10, depending on the bucket. So I have not played with this card. So I haven't played with any of these cards. But my initial instinct on this is I gave it 3 out of 10 because I don't think it's a particularly strong card. I'm guessing if you're playing with Zenith Blade, I mean, even with Zenith Blade, I don't think it's that strong. I'm thinking of cheaper things like gems or blades or things that come a bit more freely in terms of card value, because let's say it's a 1 mana 2/3. A 1 mana 2/3 would be very good, but do you want to be spending your pump spells or your kind of buff spells on a 1-drop? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But generally, I wouldn't expect to want to put so many resources into a 1-drop. And up to this point, the cards that buff my own creatures haven't been that impressive. I can't remember that many. I better not use recall in this podcast. Remember that many buff spells that is particularly strong, especially in the early game when you want to be doing this, because by the late game you don't really care about a 1 mana 2/3 or even a 1 mana 3/4. So in the early game, when you're trying to grow it alongside the opponent praying creatures, I would generally prefer just playing more creatures instead of trying to buff this guy.
I actually had this rated a lot lower before I actually played it. I was with you there on like a 3 or 4 out of 10, but then I just played it, and on the second turn I played the gift giver, and this turned into a 3/3, and then it still kept growing. Like this is just, it's like, and the Zenith Blade of course was just to give it overwhelm, that it actually like does damage and doesn't get jumped over and over again. But I would actually say this is a card you will oftentimes vengeance or have to vengeance if they have a decent deck, because it just grows so unbelievably fast and does that like each turn. You can like turn 1 you play this, turn 2 a gift giver, that is a 3/3, and then you attack into that thing, player pay cascade on it, it's a 5/5, and it's basically spiraling out of control for a 1-drop. It's basically no cost involved in it, and if you only play 1 buff spell on it ever, it already is a Bark Beast, and a Bark Beast that keeps growing. And I would have to add, for example, another example would be the Demacia Soldier, the Sentinel one. I don't know what you think about this card, the Burgeoning Sentinel. First time you slay a unit with a spell, it gets +2/+1, And this one turned out quite nice, I would say. Just imagine it does that each time you play you slay a universal spell. Each time it gets +2/+1. That would just be insane. This is just how this card tends to play
I
out.
do like Burgeoning Sentinel, but I think that's also a bit different because it's not having to invest stuff into this. It's get them use one of your kill spells to kill one of their creatures, which is what you want to be doing anyway. So on the curve that you mentioned, you're playing Saga Seeker and then into Gift Giver plus a spell, and I play a 2-mana 3/2. You can't attack into this anymore, right? Your 3/3 can't attack into 3/2 anymore, and you've spent, I guess, 2 cards on that. I've spent 1, and then maybe next turn you do some more things. You play a Zenith Blade. I play a 3-mana 3/3, for example, which is average. Your guy now trades for one of my guys plus the other guy, but you've also spent 3 cards and I've spent 2, and it's that kind of whilst you're spending your buff cards, I'm just putting more tempo on the board. And unlike Magic, where health gets regenerated every turn, this stuff does last. So eventually, me playing creatures will keep up with your buffs, because even if each of your buffs come with an extra +1/+1, I'm not sure if that really is enough to keep up with my actual creatures, because I think you'll get a lot more value in terms of stats to cost value in terms of creatures than spells.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see where you're going with this, that you're just like, it gets out-tempoed, and this was what happened with, for example, Taric decks, that they just like were too slow with support. But like if you continue thinking your example through, I play Zenith Blade on my guy, and it turns into like a 5/6 already, by just investing 1 token card and 1 real card, that drew me another card, I block you 3/2, and then I play Astral Protection on it. And then it's like a 6/11 or something. And then it's just like, how do I ever kill this 1-drop? And it's not that big of a cost for, like in the worst case, you get a 1/2 out of it. Oftentimes, if you play even a decent deck at all, you get a 3/3 out of it. And it's just a 1-drop. It's not really a Taric where you have to play 4 mana and then keep 12 mana open. It's just a 1-drop you can throw down whenever. And if you don't pay attention to it, don't misshot it immediately, then it gets out of control. But we will have to find out and see how good this Pantheon bucket actually is. To actually see. Okay, the next one is just the Wounded Whiteflame.
Maybe it's a good time to say, so you having already played a bit with the Fated, so was that in Path of Champions then, or what?
No, this guy I played against the AI. I just tried each one of these champions and the followers to see how they work out in the AI. And
Okay.
I played against I don't know, like this Lucian Rushdown deck that plays a bunch of Shadow Isles cards, and I just like, sure, I block 1, then I tackle you with my 8/10 Overwhelm, take 6 damage, next time I attack you again with my 8/10 Overwhelm, block 1 again, and they just die to that. Like, even if you're like a Swarm deck, you die to 3 attacks of this thing, which is like insane for a 1-drop.
So do you think Fated, the keyword, since this is a new keyword, do you think it will be quite effective in expeditions then?
Again, if you build a deck around it, yes. Have a lot of cheap spells, have a lot of Pale Cascades. Pale Cascade, by the way, living in this Pantheon card pool. I've spotted this already. And it's even triggered like from random stuff. Like if you have a Crystal Ibex, for example, the 4-mana 4 that gives Overwhelm. And there's like a lot of random stuff that just targets your units. It doesn't trigger off of support, but just a lot of other random cards. You could even like, this is not really a thing, but you could curve it into like the elusive guy, the 6-cost epic one. It gives an ally elusive and then it buffs it again. That's not really a thing, but it hopefully brings up a more aggressive Targon list. But we will see how good it is in expeditions, of course.
I didn't realize it got boosted off Crystal Ibex effects as well. That would, make it stronger, because my drawback for these having to buff it are these spells that I don't think are very good. I don't think Pale Cascade is very strong anymore. It used to be quite strong, but now after the nerf, I don't think it's particularly strong anymore. I don't think Gems or Blades is particularly strong on their own, so that was my reason why I didn't want to play the spells too much, because a Zenith Blade 3 mana 1/2 effectively here, will be a 2/3 is still below par. But if you can actually target it with creatures that target, then that does help it a bit.
Mhm.
Overall, I thought this keyword, I did not expect it to be particularly strong in expeditions. We'll see how it goes. And that's based on kind of existing status quo, where I think in the current meta of expeditions, buffs are only occasionally good. I'm thinking of things like back to back and things like that. Most self-targeting buffs are nothing special really, but you know
Mhm.
we'll see. Obviously, there's going to be a new meta that or these new cards that will focus on it, so maybe there will be more synergies and
Yeah.
better buff cards.
It seems insane with Riven as well, because you just generate random blade fragments and then you just throw 1 mana into this card over and over again and just keeps growing, and then at some point you give it overwhelm and quick attack and just kill them. So
Yeah, I think blades will be an effective way of doing this without being too behind on cards. Yeah.
okay. So I noticed I would have skipped a few cards. We first have Iula, I think how is she pronounced?
I don't know. I think she's actually like a named character,
Yeah.
given that it's not a job. I think it's a name. So.
Mm-hmm. As of course it's a name, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Just Iula, 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 no idea. And she's a 3 mana 3/3 that on play gives an ally Space Shield and Overwhelm this round. So it's only this round, so you don't permanently Bastion and Zenith Blade your unit. You just give it a buff 1 round. But still it's a 3 mana 3/3, so can't be that bad. Myzrael gives it a 6 out of 10. And I would say it's just like a vanilla 3 mana 3/3. This random effect doesn't really matter at all. You want to give Space Shield either permanently or situationally, and the Overwhelm 1 round oftentimes doesn't matter at all. So I would just give it a 5 out of 10 here, just your average filler creature. Of course, the trigger's fated as well, but
Yep. So Herko gave it 3 to 4 out of 10. I gave it a 4 out of 10. I also think this is mostly a 3 mana 3/3 in expeditions. In terms of giving Spell Shield and Overwhelm, obviously we have Crystal Ibex, which gives Overwhelm permanently, and that's nothing special. And giving Spell Shield this round can be useful sometimes. And the fact that when you play it, the fact that it doesn't go on the stack, it just happens immediately, and they can't respond to it is helpful. But overall, I think this Overwhelm will be what we'll be using more rather than the Spell Shield. And if that's the case, it's a slightly weaker Crystal Ibex, which is nothing special. So
mhm.
saying that, with Fated, of course, maybe Crystal Ibex will be getting a slight bump, and in that sense, maybe this will as well. But overall, I still don't think this is particularly strong because I'm still down on that archetype, Pantheon's archetype, really. So.
I find it very interesting that you give like the vanilla units like a 4 out of 10, and I give vanilla units a 5 out of 10. Probably also from the MTG background, where you can have like a vanilla 2 mana 2/2 and MTG is just not anything you want to play anymore. Even like a 3 mana 3/3 is just bad. I don't think like lore has this level of power creep yet. That's why I'm like 5 out of 10. But I think we just
Oh,
have the same.
I give it 4 out of 10.
Yes, I know. I know that it's done, but I'm not saying we both say it's just a vanilla filler unit with a random upside sometimes. But you are like saying, I don't want to play this, I want to do powerful stuff, and I'm saying this is still fine to play because power creep is not that much in Lessons from Terra yet.
Oh, yes, it's it's the thing is that I don't want to play with vanilla creatures, right? You don't want to be either, right? The whole idea of drafting is that we pick the best out of the three packs, and I'm trying to make my deck less 5 out of 10s and more, say, 7 out of 10s, right? In which case, these vanilla cards that are 5 out of 10s, 4 out of 10s, oh, I'll play them, and they're kind of the bread and butter. But really, I want to be playing with effects that are overpowered so that I can win more. So
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
my average, I would say the power level of my decks on average probably somewhere between 6 to 8 out of 10, so averaging about 7. So if I end up with a 5 out of 10, the deck, I would be pretty disappointed. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm
if I had a
thinking.
deck with Iula's, I would be disappointed, and I assume you would be too. So
Yeah, I still think I could like outplay my opponents more still with like a 5 out of 10 deck. But of course, I would prefer an 8 out of 10 deck. Anyways.
yeah, I feel like I would prefer if I didn't have to. So
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. Okay, Blinded Mystic, a weird card. A 4 mana 3/2 that on play grants an ally +1/+1 and silences an enemy follower. Very weird card. When I first saw it, I was like, what is this? And yes, Myzrael thinks it's good, gives it a 7 out of 10.
so Herko gave it 7 out of 10 as well. Uh, I think it's okay. I gave it 5 out of 10. I see this grant an ally +1/+1, and I have to assume that you do have an ally when you do it, so it's effectively a 4 mana 4 mana 4/3 in terms of stats, which is a bit below par, but maybe we can do something with the fated mechanic. And then it's how much do you value that silence an enemy follower? That is a bit tough to value in the sense that uh, some of the time it really doesn't matter at all, and some of the times it matters a lot. On average, I would say it's okay. So yeah, that's why I gave it an okay rating, 5 out of 10.
I will be the lowest one here. I gave it a 4 out of 10. Just because sometimes you won't have a unit on the board. It will just happen if they play against a Noxus deck, they have player 5/2, and then they just attack into you, and you're like, shit, they have to block, otherwise I take 5 damage. You block with your 3-drop, and then you don't have anything on the board when you play your 4-drop. And I feel like if I'm Targon and I have like stuff on the board in turn 4 or later, I'm already doing well, I'm already winning. And just the downside of playing a 4 mana 3/2 silence enemy follower, I think rarely matters in expeditions. Like, of course, you can get a random keyword off, or even like a random buff to play like the insane faded creature. But in general, Purify is not a good card, so I would think this silence is not that strong as well. And just because of the fail case of having a 4 mana 3/2, and even the upside just being a 4 mana 4/3, like 4 mana 4/3 is basically a jump bump, and jump bump is okay, but I wouldn't like jump out of the window to play it. It's just like a decent card in the mushroom deck and just a filler card in the other decks, because it's like, this is the best case a 4/3, and the worst case a card you never want to play out. I would give it a 4 out of 10, but I can see the silence sometimes being like worth it, and people be like, oh, I buffed my elusive unit for lethal and also silenced their elusive unit, and this was the best card ever. But I would say it's just a pretty high roll and a pretty win more card in that, and I don't like win more cards in general. Okay, Blinded Mystic, pretty different rating again. And let's move on to the Wounded Whiteflame. Or Wounded Whiteflame, I don't know how you pronounce it.
Wounded, yeah.
Wounded, exactly. And this one's a 3 mana 2/4 with Fury and Fated. And this might surprise some people, but I would say this is the best card in the set for expeditions, and I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. I think you would always be happy to see this card, and it's like not quite Howling Abyss level, but it comes close to it if you are any Targon deck. And yeah, it just has so much going for it. It's a dragon, so you can decorate all the dragon synergies. You're 3/2 with Challenger, for example. You're a rally guy with dragons. It's the master units, but it still comes up. It's just a decent stats on the first half, and if you ever get like one faded buff off of it, it's just a 3/5 already. It's a 4-drop. If you get 2 buffs out of it, it's becoming super high value. And it never dies in combat because it is Fury. And of course, it's in the end just a vanilla creature, but I think this will be very strong. Myzrael thinks it's a 8 out of 10, and I would give it a, let's say 9 out of 10. It's not quite the level of a Howling Abyss. You just win the game if you have it. You still have to build around it. You still have to do stuff for it. But I would say this is just probably the best unit in the set for expeditions.
Okay. Herko gave it 5 to 7 out of 10. I'm quite surprised by this, but again, I haven't experienced the fated mechanic at all. I'm quite down on it. I gave it 4 out of 10, which isn't, I guess, that down on it. But I'm quite surprised by that in that I think looking at it without any kind of buffs, a 3 mana 2/4 Fury, I'm not too impressed by. I guess it blocks 3/2s very well, but a card with Fury with only 2 power, I don't think kills very many things that the opponent doesn't want you to kill. The opponent will just not run 3/2s into it. But yeah, that's okay. So I think it really needs a bit of help before it can essentially start furying and boosting or being fated and being boosted. Of course, when you do give it a buff, then it does become pretty strong. A 3 mana 3/5 Fury after being fated is pretty strong. But I think the fact that it needs a buff essentially makes it, a bit hard to work with. And again, I think this archetype, I'm not a huge fan of the fated archetype uh, in expeditions yet. I'll have to see it before I believe it. But I'm very surprised that you're high on it, but let's see how it goes.
Yeah, my point is with Targon, if you survive the early game, if your opponent has like 2/3 on the board and they're like, I guess I don't attack with this, then I've already like done something well. And even if they have like 2/2s on the board, and this one takes out all of them if you just jump attack all of the time. And it's just a 3-drop, just a 3-drop that infinitely kills small units, almost infinitely of course, and has the potential to just grow out of control, and is basically impossible to deal with in the early turns. If you're like, oh shit, I have to I have to kill this, you just think of the Ruined Dragon Guard. It's very hard to just kill this before they get to untap with it again. And if they get to untap with it, have some buffs cards, then it's basically impossible to kill unless you vengeance it. But that can be said about any unit. I think you will be surprised how good Fated is. Maybe I'm just very wrong, but it definitely seems like the strongest archetype.
Yeah, maybe I'm not giving it enough credit, and maybe there's enough Crystal Ibex effects to target it so it becomes worthwhile. But yeah, my original argument is whilst you're buffing your fated creatures, I'm playing more creatures. Who's actually putting more tempo on the board? I don't know.
But if you don't want to attack with your creatures, you said yourself you don't want to attack with the 3/2 you put down, then well, it doesn't matter if you put down stuff if you don't want to attack with it.
Yeah, that's true. But eventually there will be bigger creatures that will outscale this, right? So, and then it's, do you want to be buffing those creatures or do you want to be putting your own creatures down? So,
Okay, we will see how it works out, but I'm quite high on it.
okay.
Okay, We Stand Together is the next one. A burst speed 3 cost card that gives 2 allies +1/+2 this round. And this card reminded me of the plunder card in Freljord. Spoils of War, I think it's called. That just grants an ally +2/1/+2 and grants it +2/+4 instead if you plundered. And I would say this card is a little bit similar to the other one, in that if you buff 1 unit, that's like good, or okay-ish for 3 mana. If you buff 2 units and get value out of it, then that's pretty good. But you have to see it's only like this round, and you have to like win 2 combats with it. If you just have like, if you have 2 3/3s, they have 2 3/3s, you attack with your 3/3s, and they block both, and then you play this card, then you have won. But if you just play this on 1 card, it's not that strong, I would say. So it's more of a highly situational card, and I'm not that high on it. Like Myzrael gives it a 8 out of 10. He rates it the same as the Dragon. And what do the other people think about it?
So I don't think Herko rated this. Personally, I'm pretty high on this. When I say high, I mean 6 out of 10. The reason why, so interesting that you compare it to Spoils of War, because I compare it to 2 cards, the 2 cards being Back to Back, and Troll Chant. So if you think of it, it is exactly half a back to back in the sense that it's 3 costing instead of 6 costing, and effectively gives you +2/+4 instead of +6/+6, right? Which is kind of half. And back to back is fantastic. I've always liked that, and in that it will win you 2 combats. And the reason why I think it's similar to Troll Chant is because Troll Chant effectively gives 2 of your creatures +0/+2, basically. And it sometimes allows you to win 2 combats, but the fact that it doesn't actually give you any power means that it doesn't actually do that very well. It will rely on your creatures to have high power, but it will give you the toughness to help that. In this scenario, it will give you a slight boost. It will only give you +1, so you still need some power on its own. But usually that's often enough to trade up. And the reason why I like Back to Back and Troll Chant and also this is that it can effectively generate a 2-for-1 on its own, which is quite a lot for a 3-mana burst spell. A 3-mana burst spell means that you can always store up spell mana for it. It's not the difference between a 3-mana spell and a 4-mana spell is huge, because sometimes you can tap out for a 4-mana spell, whereas a 3-mana you can always leave that floating, and still curve out. So yeah, I feel like if there is any card that is kind of helping the Fated archetype in this, I think We Stand Together is actually going to be that card. So I'm talking myself up here, but I actually think this is actually a pretty strong card.
Okay.
I think the 1-mana difference between this and Troll Chant, and you must have had combats where Troll Chant just like for 2 mana just obliterates the combat phase, which is pretty very good value. For 1 extra mana, you're getting essentially +2/+0. I think that's worthwhile. So I think I see the upside on this. Yeah.
My comparison to Troll Chain, I quite like that, but the downside is you can use Troll Chain to just really win 1 combat. If they attack with your LeBlanc, if they're LeBlanc into your 2/3, you can play Troll Chain and win this combat, because LeBlanc will be a 3/2 and your 2/3 will be a 2/5, and it's just good on a 1-on-1 combat as well. But this one needs to have 2 targets to be worth it, which I think makes it a little bit weaker than Troll Chain. It's also 1 more mana. And back to back is oftentimes now experience used for just pure damage as well. You attack with 5 units, they can only block 3, then you like back to back for 6 damage. And this card just doesn't do that. It just gives like health and a little bit of attack. And it's
I think that's fair. I still think it's pretty strong, and maybe this is a difference in that I pretty much always have 2 creatures on the board, so I'm carving out. Whereas maybe as a control deck, you don't always expect to have creatures on the board. You're looking to store your spell mana. But yeah, I'm always in there and brawling, and a burst spell that helps me win 2 battles is quite impressive. So
yeah, my Kindred Aurelian Soul deck doesn't often have like 2 creatures on the board. No, I gave it a 5 out of 10, by the way. I'm like quite similar on your rating, but I don't think it's like an insane card. I don't think it's a bad card either. It's just like a normal combat trick, basically. Okay, then let's move on to another champion. We have the Pantheon, I think is the next one. Yes.
Yep.
And I played him as well, and actually, I think that the Fated followers are like stronger than Pantheon. Where is he? Am I blind? Oh. So I think Pantheon will be probably the weakest champion of this expansion. Like, but Kennen is weaker and Ari, but like if you come to Rumble is pretty insane, I would say. But we'll talk about him later. And Pantheon, like what he does first, he's a 4-mana 4/2, which has like random keywords, Overwhelm and Fated, and also Barrier run for 1 round. Then he has this Gangplank level up condition that you've targeted allies in 5 different rounds. And of course, he will never complete this by turn 4, so he's more of a late game card. And when he's summoned or leveled up in his level up form, you grant him a random keyword for each round you've targeted allies this game. So if you flipped him, you get 5 random keywords, and then he is doing stuff, but you always get 5 random keywords out of him when you flip him, but before that he's just a 4-2 with Overwhelm and Fated. And actually like Fated less on this 4-cost card, because you actually, like, you don't have that much mana laying around anymore if you play a 4-cost unit, and you can't play as many combat tricks, and leveling up seemed pretty difficult, like in a reasonable time frame. In comparison to others, like Gangplank seemed easier than leveling this up. So for the ratings, Myzrael is really high on it. Myzrael says it's a 9 out of 10.
So Herko gave it 6 to 8 out of 10. Personally, I'm also pretty low on it. I gave it a 4 out of 10. So that's the same rating as I gave Kennen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm low on it because I think a 4 mana 4/2 Overwhelm Barrier is not particularly strong. The Fated, if he gets 1 buff, he becomes effectively a 5/3, which is still not that impressive. Just it takes quite a lot before he becomes worthwhile in terms of mana value. And I also think, even though the fact that he can level up in the deck, he's, as you said, Gangplank style, he's very hard to level up realistically in expeditions, because you're probably not going to target anyone on turn 1. You might target someone on turn 2, might target on turn 3. So effectively, you're waiting to, on average, probably turn 6 or 7 before he levels up. After he levels up, I think he could be quite strong, but then you're spending 5 different rounds targeting an ally. I guess in your world it would be the Saga Seeker that you've been able to target from turn 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, by then, how are you not behind on board, because you've spent all this mana casting maybe spells that are not very effective? So maybe you're relying on those, I'm going to call them Crystal Ibex effects, the creatures that target. Yeah, but overall, I just think his level 1 stat line is weak enough that I wouldn't really want to be pinning my game plan on him.
I actually have him at 4 out of 10 as well, by the way. Just to...
Sorry, what?
I have him at 4 out of 10 as well, so
Okay.
I have the same rating. And like when I tried him, I actually built a deck around him, just trying to level him up and playing all these failed cards. And of course, the one drop was insane. I was really surprised. But even if a deck that's in a deck that tried leveling him up all the time, I took me like turn 8, I think, before I actually leveled him up and played him. And then I think he got like Fearsome, Quick Attack, and Impact and Elusive. So it still didn't win me the game. And it's like not the Arsenal level where you just instantly win. You still have to work for it on a 5-attack unit, and in the worst case, you just let it through, take 6 damage, and call it a day. So I would say this is actually not that strong of a champion, sadly, in expeditions. Maybe constructed if you can really make it work. But I'd rather have my 1 mana 1/2 Fated as a champion than Pantheon. Which sounds weird to say, because I was quite hyped to see him finally in the game, but for playing him one time, my first impression is he's not that amazing as he might seem at first.
Mhm.
Okay, then we have his flip card, the Shield Vault. And yeah, this one is a physical card as well. It's a 2 mana slow, grant an ally +1/+1 and stun an enemy. I've not been a big fan of these stun cards before. We have like Guile and Sleepy Trouble Bubble. This one comes with a +1/+1, but I still don't think this will be that good. Of course, it works with Faded, and if Faded is as insane as I'm making it, any card that works with Faded gets like an upgrade. But I want to like rate these cards a little bit more in a vacuum. Don't want to just say if you have the perfect deck, it's a good card. And in a normal deck, we just give a random unit +1/+1, stun something. That seems hard to use, especially because it's slow, so I'm not that high on it. Shield Vault. So, Myzrael gave it a 7 out of 10. I'm more on the 3 out of 10 here. I don't think this card will be very good.
Okay. So Herko didn't rate this. I also gave it 3 out of 10. It's essentially for 2 mana, it's slow. It is exactly Battlefield Prowess plus Guile, right? And both Battlefield Prowess and Guile are terrible. Sometimes putting two bad cards together can make a decent card. In this case, I don't think it does. And as you said, this has a slight upside in that Fated is now in the is now in the is now in the keyword library, so it has a slight premium there. But overall, I just think this effect is not strong enough. It slow stuns, doesn't tangle with combat. It doesn't give you an advantage on the board too much, well, permanently. And where it does give the permanent bonus, 1/1 is just not enough. So yeah, I'm pretty down on this as well.
Okay. Glad we agree on this one. Let's do Camphor next. One of the pretty disappointing cards for me because he has like a really cool animation, or it, I should say. I don't know if it's like what the gender of this thing is, but it has a very cool animation. But from the like actual stat lines and effect, it's pretty terrible. If you've targeted allies 6 times this game, so this is not like on the round basis. It doesn't count like six rounds. So it's just 6 times. A little bit of a difference there. You grant it Spell Shield, Overwhelm, and Challenger. On the baseline, it's a 6 mana 5/4, which is way below. Like on average, we want a 6 mana 6/6 for 6 mana, and a 6 mana 5/4, even if it has like Challenger, doesn't seem that strong. It's basically a worse Rune Runner that is Challenger sometimes, but only if you put it a lot of work, and this a lot of work is like not happening reliably until turn 6 in Expeditions, I would say. Myzrael gives it a 3 out of 10, and I think this is actually a good rating. I will also give it a 3 out of 10.
I just realized that's the first time Myzrael's given anything below 5 out of 10. Everything up to before then has been above 5 out of 10, so there really is power creep in his opinion. So,
Counter question, have you ever given something more than a 7 out of 10?
That is a good point. I gave Yordle Captain a Minion 8 out of 10.
Okay, so one thing.
Those were the slightly highest ones. Herko also thought Camphor was trash. I also think it's trash. I want one lower. I think it's 2 out of 10. As you said, it's most of the time it's going to be a 6 mana 5/4. Some of the times later, it's a 6 mana 5/4 Spell Shield Overwhelm Challenger, and even then, I wouldn't even say it's particularly good. I think a comparison to Rune Runner is fine. I was also comparing it to Savage Reckoner, which essentially has Overwhelm and Challenger, but not Spell Shield. But it has 7 power, so it does a bit more in that respect. It's just overall very unimpressive. Like even if you flip over backwards to do its tricks, it's doesn't really pay you off well enough. So yeah, I rated it very poorly. I think this also makes me think. What are the keywords that you would most want on Pantheon? Let's say you had to give him 5 keywords in addition to what he already has at the moment.
Scout, Elusive, Quick Attack, Challenger, and Spell Shield probably.
Okay. Yeah, that's yeah, just off the top of your head. I was thinking, yeah, Spell Shield is pretty important because obviously once you have Pantheon leveled up, you want to keep him around, and Spell Shield is the best way of doing that. Quick Attack and Challenger is a great way of just being able to kill anything you want, right? That has lower health than your attack. I didn't think about Scout, but that's good. It means you can do it twice, which is very good. Elusive kind of almost goes in the opposite direction of Challenger, right? If you have Elusive, then you don't need Quick Attack and Challenger as much. But Quick Attack and a Challenger is for getting into combat and killing things. I was also thinking Lifesteal, because Lifesteal does actually matter somewhat uh, in tight games, which I would expect it to. If you're leveling up a Pantheon, you probably don't have too much. You probably sacrifice a bit of your life total. But yeah, I think what they've given Camphor is close to. They haven't given him like Quick Attack plus Challenger plus Spell Shield, which really would be quite annoying to work with. Uh, but so yeah, I think Camphor's keywords are about right in the right ballpark of what we wanted for Pantheon. But yeah, it's not quite there, and it would be very sad if Pantheon ends up without Spell Shield and just gets, as you said, after docked or get excited or something like that. So
And he has barrier for 1 round, so like 1 round he survives, but afterwards he just dies.
Oh yeah, with the barrier, I guess. So yeah.
And probably this card will be a reason why Shades will lose a bunch of games, because he always picks the epic. And we'll be like, oh my god, Fate did so bad. But we will see. Yeah, definitely not an epic you want to pick up here. We can all agree on that. So I think we should do 2 more. We can finish the Pantheon one, and then this video is already running 2 hours long, because it's just so we have so much to talk about these new cards, and then we will do a part 2 afterwards. So the last 2 cards here in the Pantheon reveal are, first of all, the Freed Colossus. Funny enough, this is the first card that turned prismatic in the set, which probably surprises a lot of people, but I have all of the gems generators in prismatic, and this is a gem generator. They're now invoke cards, and so I had to turn this one prismatic first. It's a 5 mana 4/5, and it's summoned or attacks, you create a gem in hand. And yeah, I think it's a decent card. Oh no, it doesn't show the side screen anymore. Because I have it prismatic already. I have to write on the other side basically, just for Arthur. And Myzrael gave it a 6 out of 10. And I'm actually a little bit higher on it. I think it will be a 7 out of 10. You'll be quite happy to play this. And that it's just provides a little bit of value. When it comes in already, it's a 5/5 for 5. And then if you can attack with it once, you can trade another gem. And then it will just be providing you value over time. And if you are in this deck with a lot of buff stuff, you can attack with it and then buff it. And then you get another gem. And this seems like a card that can slow roll out of control, or snowball out of control.
So Herko gave it 4 out of 10. I also gave it 4 out of 10. So obviously he comes in as a 5 mana 4/5 and gets a gem immediately, but the gem is not free. So the gem is 1 mana. So when you said he's a 5 mana 5/5, you mean he's a 6 mana 5/5, right?
Yeah, but in the late game, the 1 mana doesn't really matter that much. Of course, it's a 6 mana 5/5 at this point, but you can just leave it a 4/5. Maybe you were right. Maybe I think I'd go down 1 with Myzrael and do it a 6 out of 10 as well. I still think it's a good card, but I don't it's not as good as a 7 out of 10.
I think it's decent, or slightly worse than that. As I said, I think it's 4. So it's a 5 mana 4/5 generates a gem, and then when he attacks, he generates the second gem. And by then, he hopefully will trade in combat, and then those 2 gems you might be able to work with in terms of Fated, is the idea, obviously, with his archetype. Then maybe he's kind of done his job, 5 mana trade for something and get 2 gems. But on the off chance that it's not able to do that, I don't think it's particularly strong. There might be times when you're playing him on a defense, in which case he only gets 1 gem off, or maybe it gets killed or something. That shouldn't happen. It's not a high priority, I wouldn't have thought. But anytime you get more than 2 gems out of it, then maybe it will get a bit better. But that requires him having 2 attacks, which I think it's possible, but I wouldn't expect much more than, say, 2 attacks out of him. I wouldn't expect him to attack 3 times. And if you get 2 attacks with him, then he gets 3 gems, and that's kind of okay, I guess. So
My point is normally you want to like kill a 4/5 with like a 3/2 and a 2/2, for example. You block it twice, but what Field Colossus does, it heals itself up. Like the gems, if it gets jump blocked, it just heals up again. And if you have like 2 3/2s on the board, you're like, okay, fine, I will trade it against this. Then they attack, you block with a 3/2 because you can't double block like an MTG. And then it goes down to a 4/2, and then you play 2 gems on it, and it's a 6/4. And you're like, ah shit, I have to play something else. And the next time they play an Astral Protection on it, and you're like, oh my god, I'm doomed. And this is like a thing if they don't kill it immediately with a 5 attack unit, which not every region has, or a 5 attack or 5 damage spell that it can continuously heal itself up. And this is like something that probably helps this creature a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, I think that upside is pretty good. But even the highest upside of you being able to attack with him almost infinitely, you're getting 1 gem, which is not free. You're just getting 1 gem a turn. So you're not really doing it as such, right? So even the highest upside is still high, but it's not, amazing or anything. So I think that's fair. You didn't rate it amazing either, so that's fine.
Okay, so
Which is
let's move to the last card of this review, and like of course we will cover the other cards in the second part of this video, but this one will be Against the Odds, a card I can confirm is in Expeditions. I already saw this one. Same with like Rissu, the Sky Cloud, or how she's called. I already saw her as well. And Against the Odds is a... Let's make sure I move this one out of the way again. If your opponent is a 3-mana focus spell, if your opponent has more units than you, grant an ally +1/+1 for each extra unit they have. And so basically, if you have more units, or if it's equal, this card does nothing. And if you have like 1 unit, they have 5 units on the board, it gives you 1 unit +5/+5. Myzrael says this card is pretty hard to rate, and he rates it pretty high as an 8 out of 10. Which I don't really like. I don't fully disagree with this card. Because in a situation where you have 1 unit, they have 5 units, you don't want to make your 1 unit big. Like there's no... In Magic you have this 1000-armed giant, this 1 unit that can block like 5 different units, or 20 different units. This card doesn't exist yet. If you have 1 unit on the board, they have 5 units, you want to play more units so that you don't get like swarmed down, and the open attack, you don't want to make your 1 unit big. On the flip side, if the board is equal, or if you're ahead, this card does nothing. So it only does something when it's like useless. And I really want to get more than like a +1/+1/+2 +2 out of it. I want to get at least +3/+3, and then I have to be like pretty far ahead already to make this worth at all. And because the downside is so big, and because it's a situation, I give it a 1 out of 10.
1 out of 10?
Yes, 1 out of 10. This is my lowest rating so far, but I really don't think you will play this card ever.
Okay. I also gave it 1 out of 10. And yeah, the reasoning is exactly as you said. So for a 3-mana spell, or for 3 mana, normally you would want, if it were a creature, you would want a 3-mana 3/3 on average, right? In this case, this could be anywhere from a 3-mana +0/+0 to the highest upside would be 3-mana +5/+5, right? And the realistic one, it is somewhere in the middle, say +2/+2, +3/+3, which is not great. But it's exactly as you said, which is in scenarios where they are swarming you and you are getting the best benefit out of it in terms of +5/+5, that's not what you want to be doing. Unless, say, for example, you have a lifesteal creature, then maybe +5/+5 to a lifesteal creature will help, and you need to block the first creature they put out, because if you block it at the last, you'll probably just die. So restrict your options in that sense. Yeah, overall, I just think on average, it's just really quite bad. I'm thinking of standalone, which is pretty bad now. Obviously, this does work when, say, they have 6 creatures and you have 2 creatures, and then it will give +4/+4. But again, that's the time when they'll just go around you if you don't have lifesteal. The fact that this is focus means that it is to be rated a little bit differently to creatures, because you can focus and then add more creatures. So there is that slight upside, whereas you can't play a 3-mana 3/3 and then do something else without losing priority. But still, overall, I think this card is just in the bottom decile of cards I want to be playing. And as I said, I always have more creatures than my opponents anyway, so this does nothing for me.
Yeah, I don't know what they thought of this card. It's not even a burst card. If it's a burst spell, I would be like, okay, you can turn something around with this, but you can't even use this in combat. You just have to use this before combat, like awkwardly somehow. Like there will be like a big screenshot of someone having like one elusive, and then you turn it to 7/7. You give it like double strike or something, and you win the game against the odds. But on average, I wouldn't put this card into the deck. By the way, did Herko give it a rating as well?
Herko did not give a rating, which is a shame.
Okay, too bad.
I will say it's a very flavorful card. It's the kind of 300, final stand, right? One against the many kind of thing. But yeah, you were talking about this with Camphor. You think that's the one that Shades would lose the most with? I think this will be it, because I rated this 1 and so did you, and we rated Camphor a little bit higher than that at least. So
Okay.
So I think this is the only. Oh no, I gave another 1 in the next half as well. So I won't spoil that till next time.
Okay, so let's end our review for now. We will skip the pick a card bucket because it's like quite late already, and we will upload the second part of this set review as soon as possible. And thank you for watching so far. Again, I think we can both agree that we don't think this game is power crept too hard right now. Except to, like, other than Myzrael is like saying, or would you say this is like insane power creep so far?
Yeah, so the new cards that we got given is Bandle City, mostly Bandle City, Ionia, and Targon. And I mean, as Demacia main player, because I like winning, I don't think any of these would take it off the top spot. So it seems like you're a bit higher than me on Fated. I don't know how you are on Recall. I'm pretty low on Recall. What's the third one?
I'm super high on these Mecha Yordles, by the way. Like, I played Rumble once, and he's like pretty insane. Like, we can just click like a because what I didn't realize with Rumble, like, first of all, there is these can you actually see the Mecha Yordles in the client? Something you can test. Rumble, if you right click him, no. So there's basically, can you Google like put in Mecha Yordle?
Can you search for them? There's a filter for Celestials, I remember.
Now there's Celestials, Emperor's deck, and Mecha Yordles. So big news. We can now have the Emperor's deck in the client finally after like 10 expansions. Okay, the Mecha Yordles as well. And the Professor von Meck, the 4-mana 3/2 that creates a 1/2 and 3 cost follower in hand. This is I think this is the strongest one of all of them. I was quite surprised. But what I did in my first game with Rumble, I played the Professor von Meck first, had these random 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, then I just discarded these random trash cards to Rumble. And what I didn't realize as well, the impact counts for the level up. So once you attack with him twice, he levels up. And then on the flip, this isn't like not once a turn. This +1/+1 in hand and reduce the cost by 1. This is for each instance of damage. So if you have like 3 impact triggers, it gives them +3/+3 and reduces the cost by 3. So it really snowballs super hard, and I'm quite excited for Rumble to try him out and see if he's as good as he looks. But we will talk more about him like next time. Okay. So then let's end this for now, and have a good night, have a good day, whatever time zone you are in. And thank you for watching.
Sure.